This is Lou Katsos, and you are listening to the East Mediterranean Business and Culture Program on Cosmos FM, 91.5 Hellenic Public Radio. Tonight I have as my guest Theodore Tasoulas, the principal of Aphantis Parochial School of St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral, and we will discuss, among other things, Hellenic American Parochial School K through 8 education in the 21st century. Although different from some of the other topics I typically discuss, it ties in many ways philosophically with them. It is an important topic for many and relates to one's children, education, and choices. Stay tuned. This is Lou Katsos, and you're listening to the East Mediterranean Business and Culture Program on Cosmos FM. Tonight I have as my special guest Theodore Tasoulas, the principal of Aphantis Parochial School of St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral. And we will discuss a few things about this school and parochial schools in general here in New York. Welcome, Theodore, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Theodore, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and my understanding is this is your first year actually at the school, the Aphantis School.
Yes, it is, and I've loved it every moment of it. My background, I graduated from UC Berkeley out in California.
What did you major in?
Was psychology,
yes.
And then when I came back to the East Coast, to New York City, I went into education, and it struck my passion, and I knew what I wanted to do. So I went on to get my master's from Teachers College, Columbia, and as I was early career teacher, I entered a fellowship for the Klingenstein program, also out of Columbia, for early career teachers. So it's been a driving passion since I've entered.
Well, Columbia is a teachers' college is certainly a fantastic institution. What was that thing that sparked you to become an educator? In other words, to decide that you were going to go into this field, because different things hit people in life. What was that thing that struck you?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I think that if you ask educators, especially at different levels, they might have somewhat different answers. But for me, I think it's just the realness of children, the ability to make a difference, and really be able to connect on their level. And I think any great educator will tell you that the teachers learn or educators learn just as much as the students do. Because in order to be a truly great educator, you have to model great behavior, and you really have to be observant and aware of yourself and observant of others.
How long have you been in the field of education?
Almost 15 years, largely as a teacher, then as a teacher leader, and the last 3-4 years as principal.
And before the Aphantis School, were you a principal somewhere else?
Yep, at the same place, an independent school in New Jersey, not too far away. It was actually 2 schools. It's a regular ed school and a special ed school. I taught in both, and I wound up becoming principal of both. And it really, especially the special education and that small school environment really guided my philosophy of teaching in terms of just, putting the child first and meeting the child where they are. So that had a huge impact.
What is your educational approach in terms of the children?
It depends, at the different levels, and in Aphantis we'll talk about it's pre-K to 8th grade. Mm-hmm. You do have to change your approach, obviously, but certainly I think with that special ed philosophy, you have to see where each child is and how to best deliver the curriculum and instruction in a way that will help them succeed. The ultimate goal for all educators is to have their kids succeed, and that makes that's the basis.
For the audience, you're probably wondering, why did I choose this particular school, and why did I choose this particular topic? The reality is that I, like other people, I also, besides, the Wall Street Journal and all the rest of those papers, I also get the Ethniko Kirika. And I had seen in September in their magazine actually advertisements from various schools. And looking at them, one thing that struck me about Aphantis, or Argyrios Phantis, the way they pronounce it, is actually their advertisement. And in their ad, they were talking about their accomplishments versus just talking about, getting, let's say, a parochial school education and some of the common things. So, and I reached out for Theodore, and one thing also that interested me was the fact that he had just started in a school. And this is different, isn't it? The other schools, I imagine, were probably public and private. Were they charter schools? What schools were they?
My history?
Yeah.
No,
in terms of your principalship.
Yeah, no, it was actually independent. It was a private school.
Yeah.
Both. The special ed, though, in New Jersey, it's different, and those kids came from public school districts, but it was still a private school.
Okay, great. And I imagine by your name, Theodore Tasoulas, you have some Hellenic background.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about that, because the audience is always interested in that.
So my background, my mother is Greek, my father is half Greek, and I grew up with celebrating Greek traditions with my grandparents, Greek Easter, going to church. But in terms of me speaking Greek, that tradition died with my my great aunt, who was the last Greek speaker.
At the Aphantis Parochial School,
I'm learning.
In a very short
I'm learning
time,
every day.
You'll be speaking the language, and you had indicated that your I think grandparents came from Sparta.
Yep, and they were actually married in church in New York City.
And the church, we were talking a little bit earlier about the church. The church was actually St. Nicholas, which was destroyed in 9/11.
Yep.
And it's going up right now. Getting back to your educational approach, you talk about working with families, at least in your background, and addressing the whole child. Do you want to just go into that a little bit?
Sure. So, a school is an organization that's made up of people, and those people are students, educators, and families. And the most successful schools and the best approach is to make sure that everybody's working on the same page and with the same goals. So my job as head of school or principal is to make sure that that everybody's working as a big team. So when that includes not even being proactive and having goals moving forward. If there's problems, the first thing we do is collaborate as educators, but then also reach out to the parents and get some information there.
Let's talk a little bit about the Aphantis School. Certainly, the St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral is, I guess, the first church in what they call the Long Island area. And by that they mean, I guess, from Brooklyn all the way to Suffolk to Suffolk County. Do you want to talk a little bit about the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So the church was built over 100 years ago, and it became the Church of Brooklyn in the 60s. And around that time, they decided to build a school. The parishioners did that would best show the values of Greek and education and Hellenism. And they were able to, largely through the main benefactor, Aphantis, they were able to start a school that's now over 50 years old. What I would say is, for me, this was the second job I've had in education, so I was only at the other school. And I was, a little bit curious about what I was stepping into. And from really day one, in terms of interviewing with the school board, meeting parents, meeting all the staff, and most importantly, the kids, it's really been a blessing in disguise at all levels. Really, really happy with the school community.
Well, it's a fantastic community. The audience doesn't know this, but I used to go to this particular cathedral when I was very young. And as a matter of fact, some of my cousins went to school there. They were younger than I was, and some of my nieces went to school there. So it's a school that has a tradition and a history. As a matter of fact, this particular community, I would say, out of the 100 years that I've probably been associated, not directly, but indirectly, probably for half of that time, probably for 50 years. And among the things that I was involved in the past is when, for example, the church had a catastrophe or a fire, and I was invited by the board to actually come in and help them to put together a plan to reconstruct the church. So the school is something that I do know something about, by the way. And as a matter of fact, my mother-in-law used to be a teacher in that school.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's a really tight-knit community that spans generations, and that's really been a very impressive thing that I've noticed, and it really says a lot about the school community. When you have all of educators who have had their kids graduate, who continue to teach here, who have a whole family really through this Aphantis school community, that just speaks volumes to the tradition and the results and the kind of community that it is.
What I find interesting about that community is the fact that a lot of the people, for example, who are even on the board at one time were students of the Aphantis School. And that community is a little different than a lot of the communities. It's a very balanced community. In other words, there are people who are obviously born in the United States, but speak English and the Hellenic language at the same time fluently. And that's the fascinating thing about the community, and the fact that the parents of the students, in many cases, are on the boards, and at the same time, they send their children there, and sometimes their children's children there over a period of time. So that's a legacy that takes place.
Yeah, again, you said it much better than I could, and that's really what I've been impressed with since day one. Since being interviewed by board members who sent their kids here, who have family who have gone here, who really show that they really believe in the mission and the vision of the school. It not only helps it get results, but it really creates a safe environment for the kids who feel that as well.
For those in the community, understand that Hellenic schools, Hellenic parochial schools, are funded basically by the individual communities, and it's a burden for many of them. One thing that was interesting about this community is the fact that they support the school and financially, and they've worked out basically a plan to do this over time, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. So the churches the church supports the school as well. Obviously, the value you're getting for the education at Aphantis is much greater than what they're charging for tuition, and they're able to provide that value through the generous support of the church and also the community members over the years.
Yeah, let's go a little bit into, again, some of the things that you focus on. One thing in your background that you had shared with me has to do with teacher development. Would you like to just discuss that particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I could do that all day. So cut me off when you need to. But schools, everybody can agree that schools are made up of teachers. The school is only as good as its teachers. So my job as principal is to make sure that we hire the best teachers, support them, train them, and create an environment where they're able to really do great work. Problem in the U.S. right now is that teachers are overworked, they're not supported, they're not working together. When you look at studies and research internationally, the highest performing countries really do the opposite of that. Just today, we were sitting in a group with my middle school department in what you would call PLC, but basically the point is we were together observing what was best practices in the classroom and creating a plan for next week. Yeah, right. So teachers really need to have that support. Like I was saying before, I'm very cognizant of how the culture and how my teachers are doing in the school, because ultimately, if they're overburdened or if they're not properly supported or stressed out, then ultimately the kids are going to fail. And so it's really not about making a situation where teachers overcome like really great obstacles. It's about the direct opposite, putting things in place so that teachers can do great things.
That's a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, there were some studies on this particular aspect done 30 years ago. For example, if you look at the work of Dr. Katsos, who was a principal herself at the cathedral school, and she had analyzed 4 different schools, not giving the names of the parochial schools. And she went very deep into this particular topic on a doctoral level. So I think what you're saying is absolutely on point. Obviously, it's 30 years later, so obviously there's been a lot of development since then. Talk a little bit about curriculum design, which is also something that you like to focus on.
Yeah, so that's the next piece. You have great teachers, but part of the main resources they need is a great curriculum. And the interesting thing about Aphantis is that even though it's a parochial school over 50 years old, it really has its eye and its vision towards the 21st century education in terms of technology, in terms of integrating STEM, which is really science, technology, engineering, and math, and other initiatives like project-based learning.
Talk a little bit about STEM, just a little bit more detail, because I think that's a fascinating aspect, by the way, of what you're talking about right now in terms of curriculum design.
Right, and it shows that their eye is on the future. I mean, where our kids are learning, classic Hellenic culture and Christian principles, but really the eye is on the future. And the way that things are changing right now, it would be a disservice to place our kids in a situation where they're not ready for jobs that haven't even been created yet. In 20 years, we have no idea what the future is going to hold, but we need to know that we're putting our children in the best place and giving them the right tools to succeed. STEM, to answer your question, is a pretty large push right now in education on the whole. But it's obviously dependent on how well schools roll it out. We're we've had this is our second year in terms of doing implementation. So we worked with all staff to help not only identify what STEM is, but how it would apply to their classroom. One of the first things I did in the school was create. We're pre-K to 8, so our middle school now became our department chairs of each subject. So we have math, science, English, and social studies. So math and science department chairs are now hugely important in the STEM initiative. And one thing that perhaps a big surprise that I'm letting on the air, in this month we're going to be collaborating with the Vanderbilt Peabody of Education and another educational group they're going to come in and really support our STEM initiative throughout this year.
That's absolutely spectacular and fantastic, and these are the type of things that I like to hear, because you're absolutely correct. The 21st century is radically different. Almost you can go back into classical times, from the point of view of oral transmission to actually having writing, for example, in the Hellenic language. So in the oral tradition, and then when you went into a written language, it was leap years ahead in terms of what was happening. It changed the whole society. And now, technologically, things are advancing so fast that now we're almost in a similar scenario in the modern age. Tell us a little bit about what's happening technologically that's causing a situation where we have to train our children for the 21st century.
Well, I always thought an interesting example or parallel would be the TV, right? Yeah. So the TV wasn't invented until about 100 years ago, and you had the CRT, the cathode ray tube. How long did that last? Around 50 years, yes. Right? Then you had a flat screen TV, which came out, now 20 years ago? So that's generation one. The next generation after the flat screen was the 3D, 4D televisions and also VR technology, right? So if you look at the pace, it's not really that technology is changing, but it's the pace of change that's really fascinating and really unprecedented.
Not only that, but also in terms of what's happening with robotics and the technology of machines actually taking over in a lot of the workplace projects and jobs that are taking place right now, where you have to think, I think, as an educator, where are the students, where should the students go actually to fit into that type of society?
Exactly. Students are going to need to be, those jobs, manufacturing jobs used to be around, but now, like you said, a machine could do it typically much quicker and cheaper. So what is the role for that child? The child has to be really flexible. The child has to be a good critical thinker and a problem solver. They have to be able to adapt to certain situations and make sure that that factory or whatever is operating at its greatest capacity. So it changes the role of the child.
Talk to us a little bit about the instructional strategies that you're into.
The instructional strategies at AFANTAS?
Yes.
Yeah. So essentially, one, just like we said in terms of the role of the worker and with using machinery, a lot of the instruction in the classroom allows children to explore and learn not only at their own pace, but really to be active participants in their learning. They're not so passive. They're able to take initiative. They're able to follow their interests. They're able to think deeply and critically in a way that's going to last with them.
This is Lou Katsos, and you are listening to the East Mediterranean Business and Culture Program. Tonight I have as my special guest Theodore Tasoulas, the principal of AFANTAS Parochial School of St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral. And we're discussing a lot of things about education. Very impressive what's taking place at the AFANTAS school. One thing that you had mentioned, a little bit earlier, you just sort of went into it. You talked about researching best practices, not only in the U.S., but you were talking about also other countries. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that helped you refine your educational philosophy?
Absolutely. So, like I said, as an educator, it really found my passion. So I'm that kind of person who, always is getting research articles or investing in watching documentaries, observing best practices, even in other schools. And the interesting thing, like we were talking about technology, there's been a change. There's been about 15 years ago, they started doing international tests, and that allowed us to compare a comparative analysis of the U.S. versus other countries. And a lot of interesting phenomena came to light. Number one, basically, that we're kind of middling in English and math, and that's been going on for quite a bit. But number two, once they found certain countries that were doing really, really well, they went to go investigate them and look at best practices. And I'm all about adapting best practices. A couple of countries that come to mind, obviously Singapore, but another one is Finland, and that's been really well documented. I like Finland in the because it really represents not the typical Asian model of sense of being really, really rigorous. You think about 10 hours a day and working on the weekends. In Finland, they don't have homework until second grade. They have breaks every hour. It's a really different approach. But they were able to, about 30 years ago, raise the quality of their teaching, and ever since they've been reaping their rewards. And that's really, there's been a push in the U.S., particularly by Linda Darling-Hammond and other educators, to really model that, to do the same. But it's been difficult.
One of the things that you did talk about is enhancing student life and achievement. Can you go into that a little bit in terms of some of the programs?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said from the initial piece, our ultimate goal is the success of our students. And so you have, what are your avenues to do that? Well, you have the school day, and the school day is really guided by your curriculum and your mission. But how are you able to add that? How are you able to enrich school life in a way that you might not be able to do during the school day? For me, I've always been a big proponent of after-school programs. I coordinated in them in my previous school, and here I've added to what we already had. So at Aphantis, we already had a basketball team, art, we gave private music lessons, we had Greek dance, but I was able to add other initiatives such as yoga, robotics, chess, a cooking class for our preschoolers. It gives kids, it opens up their lives, it opens up their experiences, it gives them something to look forward to, and honestly, as a background in special education, it gives kids a chance to shine in ways that maybe they don't always shine.
Talk a little bit about the robotics, because I find that very fascinating. What are the kids actually doing in this after school program, let's say, in robotics?
Well, we're going to find out next week. It gets started, but it's going to be very exciting. We have chess, robotics, and coding. Actually, are the three new initiatives. We partnered with a company that works out of Chicago. They're going to be providing the services and the expertise.
I think the robotics are cool. As a matter of fact, they do have contests actually in robotics, don't they? And it's prominent in a lot of countries.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but it's exciting. It's a real application of engineering, right? And so we talked about instructional design. It's a different way to learn through application, right? So you're learning science, you're learning math, through problem solving, because there's a lot of failure in robotics, right? It's always about how to get it off the ground, how to get the arm to move. So it's a perfect avenue to apply STEM.
Talk about some of the development of the staff. To just elaborate a little bit in terms of professional development, that you're thinking of in terms of the teachers' preparation and collaboration.
Yeah. So, like I said, when I came in this year, they already started. The school board was already doing professional development, like I said, for STEM and also for project-based learning. What I did is I looked at the schedule strategically, and I found ways to get our staff more prep time, but also time to meet together. Because if you don't schedule that time, then it doesn't happen, then great things don't happen.
One of the things that you did talk about is actually connecting with not only the students, obviously, and the staff, but you also talked about connecting with the families of the students. How are you doing that in in the school? What approaches are you taking?
Sure. Well, I would say that they connected with me, which was a great thing. So I started in the summer, and once we did a meet and greet that was very well attended in the middle of summer. And that showed me right away that parents are vested and interested in their children's education. But since the summer, I've been having private meetings with any parent who wants to come in. To me, I look for great ideas all over the place. I am not the owner of all great ideas. I look for them. And they can come from parents, educators, students. Quite a few initiatives we have this year came from parents. We have a new lunch program now that we partner with Red Rabbit.
Let's talk about that, because I thought that was fascinating too. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, again, it's just about adding value to the school life. So we do have, New York City does provide free public school lunch, which is fine. But we wanted to offer a new, basically on our mission of education isn't just what happens academically. It's physical education, it's spiritual education, it's social emotional, right? You have to make sure you're looking at the whole child. And nutrition is a huge piece of that. So we were able to partner with Red Rabbit, which works with other schools throughout the city. They deliver daily fresh, made from scratch meals that are not only nutritious, but they're made from local, seasonal, whole food ingredients.
We talked about STEM, but this is also obviously a school that also teaches the Hellenic language, and I imagine there's some theology thrown in. It is a parochial school.
Yeah, maybe we did this backwards. I think we should have started with that.
No, I like the way this is going, actually, because this is very cool, because we are in the U.S., it's very important, obviously, to know the English language. I know because, as I said, my wife herself was a school principal of the Cathedral School for about 7 years. And she did have her doctorate in education, but the Hellenic language is something that's always important to some of the parents. Do you want to discuss a little bit about the Greek program at Aphantis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned we have our middle school department chairs, but we're also very fortunate to have a Greek studies department, which is headed by Miss Ioana Glava, and I've been working with her. She was emailing me from Greece over the summer. We were communicating and collaborating. So essentially, she's been the lead of that Greek Studies department. What does that look like in Aphantis? Starting from kindergarten, students get Greek instruction daily. So that's 5 days a week at 45 minutes. And now Greek instruction isn't just the language. It's mythology, it's history, it's Greek literature. And all of those classes are taught through books, songs, drama. Online, we use several devices and programs, and even games. We have a very dedicated community of Greeks who want to keep that language alive and keep that culture alive. One interesting thing that she is doing, actually next week, we're partnering with a school in Greece, kind of like pen pals, but we're using Skype. So we're going to be looking at each other's
Man,
school.
I love this type of stuff. This is absolutely great. What's interesting about this particular school is that, as I indicated, a lot of the people the parents of some of these students, were born here, but they're actually totally fluent in the Hellenic language, and they were students of Aphantis. And that's the fascinating thing, because a lot of students go through school, they go to these parochial schools, they learn the Hellenic language, but some of them start to hate the Hellenic language. But in this particular school, the students, the alumni, they love the Hellenic language, and you could speak to them in any language, and they're totally lingual. This is Lou Katsos, and you are listening to the East Mediterranean Business and Culture program on Cosmos FM, Hellenic Public Radio. Tonight, as we were talking, I have a special guest, Theodore Tasoulas, the principal of Aphantis Parochial School of St. Constantine and Helen Cathedral. And we left off, Theodore, in the conversation. We were talking about the Hellenic Studies program. Can you just go a little bit more in detail about that? Because I was fascinated by that.
Sure. Our Greek Studies program we have a whole department, and it really infuses throughout our whole school. We're very lucky to have our department chair, and she really oversees the curriculum, the programs that we put on. A couple of years ago, we started performing a Greek drama at the end of every spring, which they coordinate. We also have performances like the Christmas performance. Obviously, October is Oki Day. We have Greek Independence Day in March. So it's really it's all-encompassing. Not only is it everyday Greek instruction and language and mythology, you have those special performances, which really makes it a great environment.
But you're also making it fun for them, aren't you? In other words, in many schools, people have a problem with being forced into a language. But what I thought was very interesting, in particular the people who went to that particular school, besides obviously being born here and fluent in English, they were also, as we indicated earlier, fluent in the Hellenic language and could go from one language to another, very rapidly, actually, with no hesitation at all. And I think their children are the same way.
Yeah, I actually envy them. I'm trying as furiously as I can to increase my Greek language, but they go through it throughout all day and every day. They're able to code switch, essentially. It's
a parochial school, so let's talk a little bit about some of the theological aspects of the school. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I should say this is my first venture with a parochial school, and I must say that in my experience, parochial students from Catholic schools and other schools really are they're a different breed. You can really see the values that are instilled in them really come across. They're much more polite. They're much more well-mannered. It's just a different breed of students. So for us, how does it look like? We're very lucky to have Deacon Greg, who's with us for the year. He teaches religion to each class from K to 8. That's once a week. He also leads our morning prayer, which we start every day with. We also have a prayer before lunch. And then in addition to that, we have multiple church services throughout the year. We just had the Exaltation of the Cross last month, and all of our students attend these services.
Also, obviously, in these schools, there's uniforms. And tell us about that, because I was always fascinated about that in terms of having uniforms or not having uniforms. One thing that I thought was always interesting about uniforms is no one had to worry about what they wore during the day to influence anybody. Can you give us some of the psychological aspects of that?
Yeah, that's a really cogent point. As a student myself who wore uniforms, I didn't always like them, but as an educator, I can appreciate it for that very fact. You remove that piece, so it's not. Students aren't worried about who's wearing this, especially nowadays. It's really crazy. But the other thing is, it really imbues a sense of pride and school pride when you see those colors and the beautiful uniforms. We have two versions. We have a full dress code, which they use for special events, which really looks sharp.
One thing that's extremely important to parents is, yes, a great school, they're learning this, they're learning that, but what happens after that school? In particular, many people are very interested in high school placement. So would you like to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, as a pre-K 3 to 8th grade, our graduates are 8th graders, right? And so high school placement is one of our top priorities. AFANTAS has a really rich history of sending their kids to a diversity of schools. So we talked about meeting children where they are. Children are different and families have different expectations. But our students have gone on to specialized high schools like Stuyvesant and LaGuardia. They've gone on to Catholic schools like St. Xavier, Dominican Academy, and even independent schools like Poly Prep, Packer, you name it, basically. And our job as educators, starting in 7th grade, is to really work with the families and the students to make sure that they're able to navigate the ever-increasingly complex field of high school placement in New York City. So, yep.
Yeah, my children were also parochial school children. As I indicated, they did go to the cathedral school when my wife was the principal. And one thing that I noticed about the students is, in fact, the quality of the schools that they got into. For example, my son went to Browning, which is a private school in Manhattan. My daughter went to Chapin, which is extremely difficult to get in for anybody, and it's an all-girls school. And also, not only the fantastic schools that they got into, but the accomplishments later on, after high school, of what those students accomplished.
Yep. Absolutely.
So tell us, Theodore.
Yeah, absolutely. So really getting our students, not only, we were talking about preparing them for 21st century learning. That begins in the next phase when they go to high school and ultimately the university of their choice. But we start working with our students in 7th grade, providing, working with the families, starting to provide information about info sessions. Last month we had high school come in and do an info session to our 7th and 8th grade students. We also provide support and tutoring for the specialized high school exam. I did not mention our students take the regents in algebra, in living systems, and Greek, and 100% of them passed over the last few years, and that really gives them a leg up in the high school New York City high school system. Being able to pass more than 5 regents really gives you a leg up.
I think it's extremely important, and for those who don't know, I'm in the construction industry, building high-rise buildings in a city, and one of the most important things on any building is the foundation, and a certain foundation is obviously built in these schools. As I indicated, my children were parochial school, Greek Orthodox parochial schools. My daughter went on to be an orthopedic surgeon. My son went on to be a professor in law, and some of the other students that were attending, their friends actually were attending the schools, went to all types of professions, including the white shoe law firms and all the rest of that. So, I certainly support a different choice. Some people maybe want to go to public schools. Other people, maybe because of their background or experiences or what they want in terms of their family and their life, want to go to parochial school.
Absolutely. And use that keyword choice. Choice is huge. Aphantis School, I think, provides an excellent academic education, academic, social, and physical and spiritual. But it's really about that school choice. And I would be at a loss to not include our mission statement, which really drives everything. And we believe at Aphantis we want to promote academic excellence and strength of character in a nurturing environment grounded in Hellenic culture and Christian values that cultivate scholars who will mature into responsible citizens and real-world problem solvers. That's what drives us.
Theodore, thank you so much for coming tonight. We had a very important discussion. Like I indicated earlier, we were saying, well, why am I doing this? Why are we having this program? Because this program is a little bit different anyway. But at the same time, I regard this as an extremely important topic. It relates to everything we talk about. Theodore, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.